Hello and welcome, Angela.
Hello, Lady Brenda. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm so thrilled that you're on the show today. Really am.
And so am I.
We have been looking forward to this. And a little bit in your blurb that I just gave was, and I kind of wanted you to elaborate on it, was when did you realize or recognize your gifts as a medium and an empath, and were you able to see things?
I think the realization came when I was a little bit older, but the word psychic and medium was not around me as a child. And it wasn't part of my everyday life. Although there were things happening to me as a child that I recognised, looking back, something really special was happening. I think I was about the age of 4 years old, 5 years old. I was pulled on my mother's dresser one day and told her that a neighbour had been taken away in an ambulance. And she said, "Don't be so silly, I've just spoken to him." And sure enough, the very next day, he was taken away in an ambulance and he'd obviously crossed over. I think that, in reflection, that was probably one of my first messages. But I used to have very vivid dreams as a child, and quite often those dreams would unfold a couple of weeks later or days later. So I was having like prophetic visions within the dream state. But the turning point when I knew something really special was happening was when I was about 10 years old. My grandmother had passed over, and she appeared to me on the night that she passed over with a message to say that she would be back to see me later. And that was in a vision that appeared at the bottom of my bed. I knew then that something special was happening, because this time it was somebody who I loved, and I was able to make that connection. But before that, I would see spirit children in the playground while playing at school. And on my school reports, it's noted that I was always chatting in a daydream. And now I realise in meditation, that's the sort of state that you actually become in, is you actually withdraw within and become withdrawn. And that makes your connection to the spiritual realms.
Wow, that is really interesting. I love the part that gave me chills when you talked about your grandmother at the foot of the bed, because that seems to be a common thing. Like right after they die, they end up looking at you at the foot of the bed. It's interesting, isn't it? It's just...
Yeah, there's many. I was going to say there's so much common thread with everybody that has these kind of experiences. But for myself, they came too fast, too often, and too furious to actually dismiss them as, the occasional one-off experience. I knew that having a barrage of these events growing up, and especially with my grandmother saying, she just appeared in a kind of hazy ball of light. And she was waving to me, and she just said, "I'm all right, but I'll be back to see you later." And it was 7 years later, when I was 17 years old, but living in a different city, she reappeared with a message that I had to travel on a 200-mile trip to get an answer that I needed at the time. And I took it on board without any question or doubt. I get up the very next morning and I packed my bags and I travelled that 200 miles without even questioning it. And then I realised that she actually told me to go and see my Uncle Bob, and he was somebody who I hadn't seen for many years. I hadn't seen since a small child. And he actually lived on the mountain in Wales. I went and travelled not knowing that whether he still had the same phone number or the address. But when I arrived that night and knocked the door, every member of my father's house, my father's family, was in that house for that one night only, and the only person missing from that get-together would have been my grandmother. I took her place. I did try to tell my grandfather that my grandmother had sent me in a way, but I was just 17, too immature, or maybe couldn't fully understand what was happening. But I knew then that I had mediumistic gift, because I was able to receive a message, act upon it, and get a result.
Now I like that point, because so many times You know, you'll get the message, the psychic message, or however you receive it, psychically through mediumship. But if you don't act on it, then the proof isn't there. Wouldn't you agree?
That is totally, because I always say that spirit does not use a certain amount of energy to communicate. They don't use it for nothing. They need to, you know, for you to be able to receive it, but most importantly, is to act upon it.
And that is difficult too, because, you know, even when, like, we're all psychics here as the hosts of the show, and people ask for, you know, questions, and a lot of times we'll tell them, and they don't act upon it, and then it happens. And then you think about what would happen if you had acted upon it. You know, could it have changed the course? Would it have been the result that they needed, and so forth. So, are any of your family members, does this run in the family? I'm curious, because a lot of times this type of stuff does run in the family. Talent.
Well, apparently the grandmother that appeared to me, what I didn't know at the time as a child, which I found out as an adult, she was well known for being a lady with a gift. I mean, again, the word psychic and medium was not around in that generation, or within our culture of being, you know, devout Catholics. It was something we didn't talk about. It was just, if you had that intuition or the gift of knowing, it was a gift. You didn't question it. But she was a lady that was renowned for it. She was especially renowned during wartime, when she was able to tell, especially when people got telegrams to say that their loved ones were believed missing, believed dead. She was able to say, no, I can see you celebrating, having the bunting up. They're coming home. So she was able to give hope. And I think that's what messages are about. It's the fundamental essence of a message is about giving people hope for the future, the hope to an answer that's worrying people, or, you know, fundamentally it is what we give is totally hope.
That, and preparing them for the future too, which equates to hope. And that was actually one of my questions too, was, you know, why do you think people seek out mediums? And you already gave that. And the answer of hope, I really like it. I like it said that way, and instead of dire warnings, where it used to be a couple hundred years ago or more that if you had the sight, it was sometimes they thought it was negative, and it was always, you know, if you went and you got a reading, it's going to talk about death. What are your views about death as a medium?
Well, I know there's no such thing as death. It's just a continuation of life. There's the evolution of the soul. That's the mediums bring proof every day of the continuation of life, because they will connect with a loved one who will come through, describe who they are, where they lived, how they dressed, familiarities between the loved one here and them in spirit. And then maybe, if they need to say something, they will say something. Obviously, it's words of comfort and love, but there are times when, again, they will give you some guidance, advice, and maybe a warning, but never a warning where it will instill anxiety into somebody. I think that words choose the right spirit, chooses the right words in a very subtle way to tell you certain things in life. And then when things happen, you look back and you think, yes, that's what she meant. I remember being on a murder case, and I had a mother in front of me, and her son had had hands in killing her partner. I couldn't tell a mother her son's just killed a partner, although the spirit of the victim came through to said to me, it's her son, in those clear words. So I sort of froze for a while, thinking, you can't tell a mother, her son's just killed a partner. How would you, relay that in a responsible manner? And all I said was, there is 3 men involved, and one of them is known to your partner very well, and that's how it was chose to be put across by spirit. Because I always say the right spirit would not instill fear or anxiety. When you have a sitting with a medium, you should be leaving feeling uplifted and comforted.
That's very traditional and very old school. It really is. That is a difficult situation when you get the information and some of it's kind of negative. How do you relay it? But we have a responsibility to relay it, though. Don't you agree?
Oh yes, you do. It's about choosing your words carefully, because some people can come across very negatively and very damning by saying, you're going to have, for example, oh, I can see a car crash and you're going to have a car, and this is going to happen. That every day that person be looking around the corner over a shoulder. Is this the day I'm going to have a car crash? You wouldn't say that sort of thing to them. You may say, oh, there's some trouble, with an accident, but don't worry, you'll come through the other end. Things will be fine by the time such a time comes. And there's always, we've all got to go through things in life, because this journey is about one lesson after the other. It's not about perfection, it's about a learning curve. But we do have to go through things and come through, hopefully, the other side. And that's when Spirit comes through to give us messages of hope, because we go through these things in life, but then there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, we have a question from one of the other co-hosts, and I know that you do a lot of work with the afterlife, and we're going to talk about your book Angela's Angels in just a moment. But Stephen, who's one of our co-hosts, has asked, Stephen, why don't you ask yourself?
Okay, thank you very much, Brenda.
This is Stephen, Angela.
Hi, Angela.
Hello, Stephen.
I would like to know, what's the best way for me to prepare myself for crossing over the birth that is death? How can I prepare for that transition? What's the best way to prepare for it?
The best way, sometimes, some people don't usually get preparation, do they? But you see, preparation starts as we become responsible adults, and we know that the inevitable end of the process is going to happen, the end of our lives. And a lot of people subconsciously, even if they're not spiritually attuned, will know that as we go through life, we become much wiser, much more knowledgeable, much more our experiences teach us things. If we don't learn from an experience, sometimes it's repeated until we learn. But then it's to prepare ourselves to cross over. It's about making peace. Peace within our souls, peace within ourselves, and peace with the people around us.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. So let's talk about what was your very first case with what led you to work with the police, and how did that come about?
How did it come about? It was the fact that I didn't actually choose to become a medium. Shall we say that? I didn't actually.
No, it chose you. We know. Yeah. It must be.
Well, I didn't even choose to work with the police. I mean, Spirit sort of chose me with the answers and put me in positions where I would be connected. So what happened was the connection with my first murder. The connection actually happened 10 years before, as it unfolded. I remember going into, out shopping one day thinking I've got a day off. But if you're a medium, you never have a day off, because you're a channel to receive and you don't know where, you don't know when. And it's like a bit like Martini, any time, any place, anywhere. I don't know whether you've seen that advert. But the connection with the first murder happened 10 years before. I was out shopping. And then it's just one of those instrumented moments where I felt drawn to speak to a lady who was the manager of the shop. I just went up to her and said, "Excuse me, love." I said, "I'm a local medium." I said, I know you're able to understand this message and you will be able to receive it." And she went, "Oh, yes, I do believe." And I just went, "You've got a mum in spirit, a mother in spirit." I said, "But why am I hearing?" She's telling me, "You've got to play it safe. You've got to," those are the words, "you've got to play it safe." And she said, "I'm trying to escape from a violent man." And I said, "Well, you've got to play it safe, my love." And then I went, "Don't worry, there's a man with dark hair, with black moustache, with lots of black cars around him. And she went, that's my new friend. He's an undertaker, hence the black cars around him. But that message was, as I left the shop, I said to her, I can see you managing public houses, which was bars in your sort of terminology. And she said, no. She said, I did that years ago. And I said, oh, okay then. I said, cheerio, but please play it safe. Anyway, it was 18 months later. I'm looking for a venue for a christening, and I walk into a local bar. And who's behind the counter but the lady from the shop? And it was that lady who then became a manager of a public house, who then phoned me one day and said she'd had a robbery, that they'd stolen money out of the gambling machines on the premises. And she said to me, come on up. She said, you might be able to help. So I went up, very reluctantly. And then I stood there and I had a series of visions. And I just went, look, there was two men over there smashing that machine. And at the same time, there was another man over the other side of the room smashing the other machine. And she said to me, my goodness, all that's on CCTV camera. And I went, well, don't worry. And this is where the prophetic and the hope came. And she said, don't worry, they'll have the cheek of the devil and come back here and buy a meal. And 3 days later, 3 men came back in that public bar and bought a meal. And I just so happened to be passing at the time and called over Carol, the lady, and she then called the police and they got arrested. But then it was some time after that, months down the line, I had another phone call from her to say that a publican like herself had been murdered, and she begged me to go down. And I reluctantly said again, but this is not just a crime, this is murder. And I made a half promise. But then on my travels a few days later, I was in London and I was chilling out in a beautiful garden, and then I heard the voice of my father's spirit, and all I heard him say was, what about this murder? And I knew then I had to visit the scene of the crime. And then a few days later, while I was back home, I went to visit the scene of the crime. And as I drove onto the car park of the public house, I looked over at the house and had the first vision. And it was of 3 men climbing a black fire escape staircase over some railings and then in through some French windows. And I knew exactly that there was 3 men involved in this. And then with that first vision, it gave me the courage to knock the door. And I just said, and just so happened, the victim's partner answered the door. And then I had a series of visions, one after the other, piecing it together. But, I did relay that first message to her in the first vision I saw. And she just said, how do you know they got in there? She said, of all the doors on this building, she said, how do you know got through there? I had to reassure her that I was genuine. And then she invited me in, and as we climbed the stairs, I saw a second vision of chairs in a room being all knocked over. I said, where are you taking me? The chairs were all knocked over. And she said, actually, upstairs is the restaurant, and all the chairs were knocked over. But when we entered the restaurant, all the chairs had been cleared because the forensics had been. And there were several doors leading off the restaurant, and I pointed to one door and I said, that's the door I want to go, I'd like to go through. And she said, just hold on, I'll move the dog. She had this dog obviously for protection. And little did I know that she was actually putting rugs over the bloodstains, not to give me any clues, but in reality, in my reality, she's trying to disguise things for spirit. And of course I went through the door, and it was a long corridor with several rooms leading off, and I just said, I want to go to this bedroom here. And as I stood in the doorway, I could see 2 men struggling, splattered with blood. And I said to her, there was a struggle that took place in this spot here. And as I entered the room, I could see a mixed body lying under the window and the injuries. And I just said to her, a mixed body was found lying under that window there. But this time she was in quite a state, and she kept saying, how do you know all this? How do you know all this? And then I turned my back, and as I turned my back to glance at the corridor, I see these 3 young men running down the corridor carrying something the size of a shoebox. And I said, they're carrying something the size of a shoebox and they're fleeing out of here. And she said, yes, the safe is the size of a shoebox. And then she said, and she was still very, very shaken. And I too was having one flashing vision after another of what had happened within that room. Then she said to me, please, please tell me it's going to get solved. And then all of a sudden, within my visions, because visions are not necessarily of dead people, visions are obviously of the living people who have caused, who've been involved with the crime at this point. So within those series of visions, I then get a communication from the murder victim himself. And he appeared in front of me and he was showing me a gold chain bracelet. And I said to his partner, there was something about a gold chain bracelet. And she said, there was a robbery 6 weeks before this where his gold chain bracelet went missing. And as soon as she said that, I heard his words, it's her son. And that's when I held back and realised you can't tell a mother her son's just murdered a partner. And then I asked Spirit for obviously they've instrumented me. And then I said the words appropriately, that there was 3 of them and Mick knows one of them very, very well. So as I was leaving, she said, please, please tell me this is going to get solved. And then very prophetically, as sometimes I do, say things very prophetically, I said 4 months from now, they'll round up 3 men and a woman. And she went, a woman? And I went, yeah, there's a woman involved in this somewhere. And she knows everything about what's happened. And she went, no, no, no. She totally refused, to think that a woman would be involved in this sort of thing. But that's what I heard. And I just had to give what I received. And I said, yeah, there is a woman involved in this. It will be found out. So as we left via a different sort of entrance, we went down a different staircase. We had to go through a bar, and as I glanced over at the bar, there was a young man behind the bar. And then all of a sudden I went cold looking at him, and I knew he was one of the culprits. I knew I was looking at a son then. But I left the building that day thinking, dear God, why me? Why have you shown me all that? And I didn't know there was going to be a good purpose, was obviously to relay your information and help in that situation with an answer. But I didn't know that, 3 years after that, it would be turned into a TV documentary that circulated the globe and went to 85 different countries. But the uncanny thing about that, the continuation was, I came home and carried on with my work for a few days. And I had a phone call from a woman who said, from another side of town, said she needed me desperately to come and see her. So I obliged. I went to see her. She had a sitting. Her mother came through. And then all of a sudden I said, well, your mother's here, but she's saying that she's with somebody called Michael. I said, and she's insisting his name's Michael, but everybody knew him as Mick. And then all of a sudden, I had the same spirit visit me, and it was Mick from the pub murder. And then I said to her, I said, oh my goodness, I've got Mick from the pub murder here. She went, he's my brother. So Mick communicated a second time, and this time he reassured her that she would get justice, and she would get justice 3 times. And she said to me, you were so spot on with my mother. I just hope you're right with the information you give me about my brother. And I said, yes, yes. He's shouting justice, justice, justice 3 times. And apparently, I also said to her, we had a link with Stafford, an area some miles away. And she said, no, no, no. She said, Mick hasn't got a link with Stafford. But what unfolded was, to cut a long story short, really, 4 months after the day of my visit, they rounded up 3 men and a woman. The woman was a young girl who had drove them to the public house and dropped them off. And they all got done, they all got 20 years apiece, the three men involved.
Wow.
Hence the justice, justice, justice. They got maximum sentences. The young lady got a lesser offence, 6 years, for aiding and abetting. And in the documentary that was made, you've got the sister saying there's no way on earth that Angela said something about my Mick having a link with Stafford. And, excuse me, what turned out to be was the Crown Court hearing, the final hearing was at a place, Birmingham Crown Court, but on the Friday before the Monday for the final hearing, it got transferred to Stafford. I have no doubt that Mick's spirit was in the court that day watching that final hearing when he got his justice.
We definitely came through strong. That is pure evidence of, a spirit coming through, giving you this information. We're going to pause for 1 minute, Angela, for a commercial, and then we'll get right back, okay?
Right, thank you, Brenda.
Okay.
A new era in psychic services has begun. PsychicAccess.com. You can connect with our psychic advisors by telephone or chat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All of our psychic advisors are interviewed, fully verified, and accuracy tested, assuring you quality service. We're living in some very troubled times right now. More and more, the world's problems are affecting us on a personal level. You don't have to deal with this alone. Our highly accurate psychics, caring advisors, and talented mediums can help with situations you are currently experiencing and can let you know what the future may hold for you. All new customers get a free 6-minute reading. All you have to do is register. Why not visit us now and get a free reading at PsychicAccess.com.
Okay, let's hold that thought. So, tell us about your calling. We were talking about your calling as a medium and how it has to be instilled as a service. And we talked a little bit about your first really intense case here. So, let's continue the conversation you were saying with Steve.
But, people who, like myself, I never wanted to be a medium. I didn't even know what the word meant. But, obviously I've learned since through experiences and through direct contact with my spirit guide in the spiritual realms. I wake up with very vivid dreams, words from spirit, and quite often they will teach me things and tell me things. But to be a medium, I think, first and foremost, is that want to serve others and to help. You've got to be that type of personality. And then there's a responsibility with it. But then there's a genuine love of people and the fact that you're here to serve others on earth. Because this journey is not about conducting yourself. It is, in a way, conducting yourself, having personal responsibility. But it's also about what you do for others, regardless of, what type of work you do. Because remember, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And we're sent to this earth plane to do a journey, but the journey is about helping others first and foremost.
Well, I think that's everybody's in one form or the other. We get so disconnected in the mundane world, and we don't find what our purpose is. Now, you were speaking about guides. Now, who are some of your guides? Do you know who they are? Are they relatives? Is it your grandmother?
Well, I know that, what I've learned from Spirit is that when we're all born with a guide, and your guide changes accordingly depending on what you're going through at the time. It's a bit like, if you've got a leak, they'll send you a plumber in that sort of sense. Whereas it's like if you're going through a particular experience, they're going to send you someone from the spirit world who've shared or experienced that experience themselves in a previous life, and they have the advice and the guidance to help you. As we know, guides don't step in every second when we demand them, because there are things that we have to learn and things about our journey that has to unfold and that we have to learn ourselves. But they know when to intervene, and it is at crucial times in your life, and the most crucial times. But I am aware that I used to have, the vivid dreams from a child that would become prophetic, happenings. But there was 2 nuns that used to appear to me, and I dismissed them as as a reflection of a time, a traumatic time, being placed in a convent as a child. So I used to dream about them regularly until they started to talk to me, and I remembered what they were saying to me. There was one nun who said to me, "You will grow up and tell the world about the spirit." Didn't know exactly what that meant. When I went into spiritualism, which is a religion, I thought they'd missed a word off the end by saying, "You're going to tell the world about the spirit world." But it wasn't. It was about the spirit, the whole encompassing word involving spirit, everything connected to that word. Because it's about, our spiritual journeys. It's about discovering the power of spirit and the spirit of God in corporate, and also the hierarchy of the spiritual realms. But, my guides there was one of the guides that stepped in, and I discovered personally who she was. And what it was, I was having healing from a healer one day, and I drifted off in a meditative state, and I saw this nun, but she wasn't like the nuns that I used to know. She appeared in a short white headdress, and her mouth was moving. I could see the picture, and she just said, "My name is Therese, and you will find me in a book." And she just disappeared. Well, my healing had finished. The girl that was, had her healing hands on me said, she said, "I'm not mediumistic like you, but when I was healing or trying to heal you, I saw a nun." And I said, "Oh, and so did I." And her words were, "But she's not like the nuns." She said that, you think of in black and white. She had this short white headdress on. And I said, I saw her exactly the same. I said to her, "Did she speak to you?" And she went, "No." I said, "Yes, she spoke to me." She said, "Her name is Therese, and I'll find her in a book." So with that, again, I felt instrument to go and search. And I went to libraries and books, and I scanned, computers. Who's this nut, and then, pardon the pun, I gave up the ghost. And it was 18 months later. I just so happened to be in a Catholic bookshop, and I scanned, my eyes scanned the bookcase, and I saw a lady with her hair up in a bun and a Victorian sort of high-collared neck dress. And I recognised the face, and I just said to the lady behind the counter, "See the lady down there on the front of that book?" I said, "She wasn't a nun by any chance." She went, "You're only looking at St. Teresa of Lisieux." And of course, I had to buy the book. And when I bought the book, I opened it up, and she was one saintly lady who had a lot of photographs was able to take of her, because she lived, or should we say she passed, I think, don't quote me, but it was about 1923 when she passed back to spirit. She was quite a famous saint, a lady, a nun who became a saint. And obviously, it was obviously St. Teresa, who I grew up called St. Teresa of the Roses, but didn't make the connection because I never ever saw a photograph of her. I always saw, one of these elaborated prayer cards with a picture on. So when I saw her face for real, I realised it was the lady that's been communicating with me. And that was my, confirmation. And there she was in the book with the short white headdress on as a novice nun.
Fascinating.
And that was, to me, the concrete evidence, basically. And her voice, obviously with a French accent, sometimes I hear. But again, it's been at poignant times in my life. It's not that I can call her up every day on a phone line. I wish I could. But I know, for some reason, my little channel receives her communication. But the strange thing was, I bought the book and read a life story, and there is that many uncannily parallels in our lives. You understand the parallels, yeah?
Of course, that's definitely that's really fascinating. So,
but the fascinating parallels very quickly was, she was the youngest of 7 children, so was I. She was brought up by a single parent, so was I. She lived at number 36, so do I. She suffered migraine, so do I. And also, there's 2 photographs of her as a child and one again as a teenager. And the strange thing, we had the same hairstyles in those photographs at those ages. And the strange thing is, I have a daughter, and when you put the photograph of Therese next to my daughter's, they are so much alike. Everybody says, "Is that your puppy?" And I go, "No, that's Saint Teresa as a child."
Well, that again is more evidence of the circle and the continuation of the life force, and the reincarnation. It could very well be a straight reincarnation.
Sorry. I do believe in reincarnation. I've been shown and given too much evidence of it. And I know that, Hinduism is based on research on the under 5-year-olds, should we say, or the evidence that they produce. Because I think that, under 5 young children will give you the greatest evidence, dates, times, events that have taken place in times when you know that they've not been around.
That's because they're unfettered by the physical world. They're still open to spirit, and what they're telling you, their parents will squash it down. You're telling lies. They don't make up those stories, but they really are relaying evidence of their past lives. Yes. Now, I have heard from other mediums that I know that sometimes working so intensely with spirit affects you physically. Have you experienced any illnesses related to your work?
You're exactly right. I've never met a healthy medium. Oh, yeah. Migraine especially, and that's a classic. Retention, water retention, because when you think about it, water conducts energy, and we're 70% water. And if spirit energy is like electricity, because it is an energy force, the more water we carry, the more receptive we are. But I always say in my lectures, and when I'm training people, or should we say, when I'm tutoring people, different. I always say that, you should drink a glass of water when you're working, because water conducts energy. And also, you have to be careful about treating yourself kind, looking after the physical body, to make it a better receptor. Because if you don't, you kind of take on ailments of the spirit, because they'll bring in, what they had passed with. They'll give you, excuse me, they'll give you, maybe it's somebody around me who had a bad chest, because I've got a bit of a cough now. Excuse me. But
and how do you protect yourself from that? I know it's not possible to protect yourself all the time, but how would you would you do a cleansing afterwards, or protect yourself beforehand?
Well, I believe in the power of prayer and meditation. Before I work, I always say my prayers, and it's within that prayer state. Quite often, if I'm called to murder cases, and I'm quite, over vigilant about wanting to connect, shall we say. The want is, severely great, thinking, these poor women, these poor people are in dire straits. They're probably flying me from one end of the country to another. They're wanting, answers to a serious situation, more serious than most, shall we say. And I always have learned from that is I always say my prayers beforehand, before I go to sleep the night before. Well, I say them every night, but, if there is a murder case, I'm begging and pleading with God. I go into my meditative state, and quite often I'll be given the first vision connected to the murder before I arrive the next day. And there's been a number of murder cases where I'm shown something first. But it's all about preparation. And it's about you being kind to your body, and trying to look after yourself, make sure you eat the right things. I mean, ideally, being vegetarian helps, because your channel has to be pure. Drink plenty of water, don't smoke, all the vices, should we say. But we're only human, aren't we?
So no martinis or red wine, huh?
Yeah, because alcohol can actually distort the spirit body from the physical. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, I like that.
It does. It does. It disconnects.
Well, before we run out of time, Angela, I want to talk about your book, Angela's Angels.
Angela's Angels was published by Hay House here in England. First, it was initially had a nun on the front, but now it's a pink cover now, and it was snapped up by Hay House because of the endorsement of the chief police saying a wonderful quote which he spoke in the documentary. He actually said, "If I ever found myself in the position of the victim's family, I certainly would go down the road to the olive branch of hope that Angela was able to offer." And I think that sums me up, really. I offer hope to people in the direst of straits, with visions from spirit and communication, giving you answers to questions. But the book was one of the hardest things to write. I mean, in my head, I've got 10 books. I'm on my 4th book at the moment. But that was kind of a life story which I had to touch upon because it's been such a colourful life. But what I decided was to take the best spiritual experiences from each decade of my life and sort of string it together, because the book was about my spirituality and my spiritual experiences. I also had to say, where the connection was made and what was happening at the time. And quite often it was, in the greatest, in the most traumatic moments in my life, I've been given the greatest evidence of the spirit world. And it's during those times that, the greatest connection and, was made, and I got my answers, visual, wonderful things happened, or should we say paranormal things were happening, which I didn't understand. But if you read the book as a child, each decade tells you the link between these spiritual experiences, and you can see the development of the gift through the decades to the extent where now police use me on murder cases.
Do they call you up, or they already know about you? You're well known.
They know me. Quite often they come in incognito. They visit my house.
That was going to be my question, because sometimes the police here in the United States, they don't want to admit that they would benefit from using a psychic or a medium on a murder or a crime case, but they do end up seeking you out.
Oh yes, and it's not about actually solving the case. You're actually, one of the favourite sayings of one of my detectives is, I'm a tool that helps to gather the evidence. We don't actually solve it, we become part of the gathering of the evidence. And what we do is we go in, we confirm details of maybe a line of inquiry that they're thinking along. We obviously are told no information whatsoever. Quite often they just take me to crimes of scenes and locations. They can put, I'm in a car with a detective, and he'll just say, "Right then, tell me what you see round here," and then it'll all unfold. And there was one particular case which is the start of this new book called the new book coming out soon called The Afterlife's Guide to Living. But that starts with a serial killer, should we say a suspect serial killer, and an officer took me to a housing estate and just said, "Tell me what you see here." And I said, "I want to go to the cul-de-sac that we've just passed." He said, "Well, get out the car then." And of course I went to the cul-de-sac, and as I outside the house, as I glanced over that house, I could see a boy hanging on the stairwell. I got back in the car and said, "There was a boy found hanging on the stairwell in the number 2 house." I said, "But it was not now, it was 1980s. He said, "You're exactly right." And then very prophetically my head turned and I went, "Yes, and it's all to do with the lodger." And he looked at me and he said, "Our prime suspect was the lodger in that house."
Now, a lodger is a renter.
A lodger is somebody who temporarily lives with a family or is boarded up.
Okay.
The family is staying at a family's home, and they're not related.
So that was the beginning, huh?
That was the beginning of a day of a number of locations that I was taken to across many miles, and literally it was piecing together a guy that they'd got who they suspect was a serial killer, and I unfolded almost every one that they wanted to know about, which was 4 young men that had been suspiciously, 2 of them were actually found hanging, but they were labelled suicides back in 1980s, but the new evidence that they'd found had reopened the case because it was quite heavy going. I mean, the last one is one that I would never forget because he took me into a thick of woods and there was hundreds of trees. I pinpointed the one tree where a boy was found hanging, and then I realised, I said to him, this boy was dead before he was strung up. And then I had a vision of the man. I just was able to describe him, and he just said, you're exactly right. And because he started questioning me about my visions that I was having in very, very great detail. Like, for instance, he was saying, oh yes, you can see a boy. Tell me, what is he wearing? What's the colour of the robe? Anything else you can tell me? And then when I saw the man, he said, tell me what the man's wearing. And then he wore something very significant, like this strange woolly-looking hat. And I described it to a T, and he said, I've got a photograph of our suspect wearing that hat. And obviously I was exactly right about the boy, and even the minute detail to the 2 knots and the ring that was in the rope. And he showed me the picture of the rope, which had 2 rings and a knot in it.
Did they catch him?
Oh yes, they've got him. It's just that he's a prime suspect. They've got him for 2 murders, but they realised he's done a lot more.
Well, this is... So when is this new book going to be coming out? Are you going through Hay House again?
No, not this time. I'm debating what to do with it, but it's complete and finished. But again, it's all about the new book, Angela's Angels is still circulating. It won awards. Everybody tells me it's going to make a great movie. I'm hoping somebody out there would turn it into a movie. And I know
you
Spirit
never know.
has shown me
that
in
would
a
be
vision
fabulous if that happened.
that somebody will pick it up. So I'm just waiting for that day. Because each chapter tells a story. In Angela's Angels, there's wonderful people I've met on my journey. Rock stars, nobility, royalty, saints and sinners. In the book, there's Paul McCartney, Ozzy Osbourne. I don't want to name drop, but they've all been part of my life.
I love Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh, do you? Well, he recently
do.
paid me a compliment, but I can't repeat it.
Well, I'm just going to have to get a copy of your book, Angela.
Yeah. But you see, my claim to fame has not just been me. I used to date Ozzy Osbourne's brother. And I would have been an Osborne before Sharon.
Interesting. That is very interesting.
And then, of course, I am famed for channeling Linda McCartney just after she passed because, see, my connections was I met the McCartneys in the 70s on many occasions because I lived around the corner in London. And we used to meet up, chat, have hearty talks, joke with each other because we're both from Liverpool, me and Paul. But you can't tell by the accent now because I talk dead posh. So so I've got a collection of things Paul McCartney.
That is so fascinating. Well, Angela, we're at the end of our interview right now. I wish we could talk for hours and hours, and I really, so grateful that you took time out of your early morning. What time is it in England?
Oh, well, I did get the time wrong. I mean, you were 8 hours behind, but no, I think it's about 2 o'clock now in the morning.
Oh.
So that's not too bad.
Well, thank you, Angela. It's been, I have a lot of respect for your work. It's been incredible interview and listening to you, and I know all my other co-hosts have really enjoyed it too. So thank you again.
Thank you, Brenda. It's been my absolute pleasure. And I hope to, speak to you one day again soon.
We'll have to have you on again, definitely.
Because there's so many stories to tell.
Oh, I know. And then we could talk about more. So I guess it's time for you to go to bed, at 2 in the morning.
Yes, it's time to have my cocoa. I've got my slippers on and I'm going to bed now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Angela.
Okay. Good night and God bless.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Res Miranda, If you're having relationship, career, or life issues, I'm inviting you to experience what it's like to have access to professional, highly accurate psychics and spiritual advisors you can trust to care and help you. Register now to get your free 6-minute reading by telephone or chat. Get answers. Get access. Psychic access. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. PsychicAccess.com.